couldn't let the week of Valentine's Day go by without sharing a couple of stories about love, just one of the strong emotions that seem to be the source of so many paranormal events. This first story is one I heard years ago while on a New Orleans ghost tour. In New Orleans in the late 1700s, there was a beautiful young woman of color named Julie who fell madly in love with a wealthy white landowner. He spent a great deal of time conducting business in the city, and during these trips, he romanced Julie, taking her to all the most fashionable balls and parties in town. Her beauty was the talk of the town, and he liked the feeling of envious eyes watching when he had his beautiful lover at his side during these visits to the city. He put her up in a beautiful 3-story building, 734 Royal Street, right in the French Quarter. As his lover, she lived a lavish lifestyle. He gave her beautiful dresses, jewelry, and other fine things. The best food and drink, anything a young New Orleans socialite would want. Everything except one thing. He would not marry her because she was not white. Not only was it illegal at the time, but he knew his family would expect him to marry another white landowner's daughter. He didn't want to upset and lose her, so he would tease her by saying, "Sure, we'll get married if you do this or if you do that, if you wear your hair a certain way or kiss me behind the ear." Tons of little requests just to distract her away from marriage. Julie was madly in love with the young man and would comply with all that he had asked of her, and then he'd make a new demand of her. This went on for months, and she became increasingly more insistent that he find a way to marry her. He hoped she would eventually stop pushing for marriage and just be content to be his lover when he'd visit New Orleans. On one such trip into the city, he was exhausted from the long, cold ride. It was a very cold night in December. If you've never been to New Orleans, I must tell you it's very humid, which means whether it's cold or hot, there's a ton of moisture in the air. This makes New Orleans summers oppressive and the coldest winter nights miserably damp and frigid. This was one such night. The landowner arrived at Julie's home in the French Quarter and took off his heavy coat. She was happy to see him and brought him to the fireplace, where there was a toasty fire warming the room. She sat on his lap and they laughed and kissed. He was telling her about the ride into town and how miserable it had been. She said, "You wouldn't have to travel if we were married and if you lived here with me." This frustrated him, and he pushed her off his lap. He was tired of her pleading with him to get married. He was sick of having to explain that he couldn't marry her. He was annoyed by her loneliness and her pleas about marriage, and finally said, "If you want to marry me so badly, then prove it. Take off your clothes and go up on the roof and stay up there until the sun rises, and then I'll marry you." She burst into tears and ran to the bedroom. He, being equally frustrated with his own temper, had just ruined the short time they'd spent together, put his coat back on, and charged back out into the night. He quickly found a local gentleman's club, bright and inviting, and lost himself in drinking and cards. It was early in the night, about 7, but it was already so cold. The Mississippi's thick mist was rolling in. It hovered in the air and coated the cobblestone streets. Meanwhile, Julie was devastated. She laid in her bed and cried until she didn't have any tears left. His words stung, and she thought about what he'd said. "I'll show him. I'll do it. I will go up on that roof, and then he'll have to marry me." She took off her beautiful dress, her fancy shoes, and even her jewelry. She took the steep metal stairs to the roof of the house. There was a small, narrow walkway close to the chimney. Just 3 stories below her was a raging fire, warm and cozy. All she felt of it now was the slight warmth of the chimney bricks as she crouched down and leaned against them. She curled up into a little ball against the warmth of the chimney and winced as the cold air hit her exposed skin. She was afraid of moving too much for fear that she might slip and fall to her death. She closed her eyes, wondering how long it would be until the sun came up. While at the club, the landowner ran into his friends and they lost themselves in card games and rum. Pretty soon, he forgot about his argument with Julie and what he'd said to her. He spent hours playing cards, drinking, laughing, smoking, doing all the things he loved doing in the big city. Just after 4 a.m., one of his friends asked about Julie. She was usually with him on party nights like this. "Oh, we got into an argument and she's cross with me," he said. Seeing that morning was approaching and feeling the rum, he said his goodbyes and stumbled back to the house on Royal Street. He opened the door and took off his coat. The first thing he noticed was that the house was quiet. She must be sleeping, he thought. Then he saw that there was no fire going, and the fireplace was cold. It had been out for some time. The house was cold and dark. He went up the stairs to their bedroom and opened the door. The bed was made, but it hadn't been slept in. He stood silently in that bedroom. Such a stark contrast from the noise and partying he had just been a part of. Then it hit him, the last words he'd said to her. With a sickening feeling, he stumbled through the house, slamming open each door, but every room was empty. With panic setting in, he knew there was one last place to look. He climbed the steep metal stairs, opened the hatch to the roof walkway, and looked around the roof in the growing daylight. Leaning against the now cold chimney was Julie's lifeless, naked body. He ran across the roof, sliding on the slick tiles, and collapsed in front of her. Her skin was like ice. Her arms were stiff, folded around her knees like a beautiful, crumpled doll. She had done exactly as he had asked for the final time, but now would never marry anyone. To this day, on cold December nights, people report seeing the ghost of a beautiful young lady walking on the rooftop of that same building. Sometimes she is naked, and sometimes she is seen wearing a wedding dress. When 734 Royal Street was the home of Bottom of the Teacup psychic readings, the owners reported that Julie roamed the inside of the building too, but that her presence was always friendly. Customers also reported hearing laughter and singing and felt the energy of the young woman named Julie. It's also been reported that a sad man's spirit is seen walking in the garden of that building, and it's believed to be the young landowner. Just out of college, I moved into an old apartment building in New York City. It was run down, but it was really all I could afford at the time. It wasn't too bad, just needed some renovations. I had been living there for about 2 weeks when I found an ad for an estate sale across the city. The ad said there would be furniture available, which is really what I needed. Right now, I only had my bed and TV, the things I used the most. I worked a lot back then, so I wasn't home much, and when I was mostly sleeping. I went to the estate sale and found a big, funky lounge chair, like a real lounge chair. You could prop up your back on one end and stretch your legs out comfortably, but it was big, covered in beige fabric, and had room enough for 2 to 3 people to comfortably recline on. I paid the estate company to move it to my place, and a few days later, movers hauled it up the stairs and set it in my living room. It was really eye-catching, especially in my mostly empty apartment. Along with the chair, I had also bought a small table with a drawer to put near it and face them both towards the TV. After the chair was delivered, weird things started happening. Nothing overtly strange, just small things. I would hear shuffling sounds in the living room from the bedroom. I'd go into the room and nothing would be out of place, and of course, nobody would be there. I sometimes heard crying, but brushed it out of my mind, assuming the crying was coming from my neighbor's apartment. The walls were pretty thin. One day, I came home from work to find my hairbrush on the chair, not in the bathroom where I had left it. Other days, it would be a tissue box or a hand towel, each placed neatly on the chair. I was in the habit of buying my favorite flowers, daisies, When they were available from the street vendors I walked past on my way home. I'd set the flowers on the kitchen counter in my white ceramic vase. One night, when I came home, I put the flowers in the vase and went to change my clothes. When I came back into the living room, I found a daisy on the chair, as though somebody had plucked one from the vase and set it on the chair right there in the middle of the room. The rest of the flowers were still in the vase on the counter. I stood in shock, trying to figure out what had happened. Maybe I grabbed one accidentally and it had dropped onto the chair when I walked past it? I shook my head. I don't know what's going on, I thought to myself. Another evening, I picked up a mixed flower bouquet that had lilies and daisies in it. The next morning, I found the vase and the lilies broken on the floor. The 3 daisies in the arrangement were placed on the chair. Now this really creeped me out. I had no explanation for what was happening. I think sometimes when you can't explain something, your brain just pushes it out of your mind and doesn't let you think about it for too long. One night, my friend Erica came over for wine and movies. We had some takeout and drank wine while watching a movie. We were lounging on the chair. I was sitting closest to the bedroom door, which was open, and Erica was sitting to my right, farthest from the bedroom door. Suddenly, my bedroom door slammed shut. We both jumped, and I turned to look at the sound. Erica let out a gasp. A second after I turned to look at the door, she jumped off the chair. I turned back around and looked at her. Her eyes were wide, and she was pointing at the corner of the chair closest to the bedroom door. "There was a man there," she said, pointing at the edge of the chair. "What? Where? What do you mean there was a man there?" She said, "I don't know, but there was a man right there, like an old man, and he was looking at you." Of course, there was nothing there now, nobody. It was just us. For a second, I thought she was messing with me, but the fear on her face was real. She described the man she had seen. He was an older man with glasses and short hair, sitting on the corner of the chair, bending forward as though he was reaching towards me. I started telling her about the weird things with the flowers, and things moving around like the hairbrush and the box of tissues. I told her that all of this had started when I had bought that chair. She asked me where I got it, and when I told her it was from an estate sale, she told me I needed to find out who owned the chair before I had. After she left, I stood in the middle of the room staring at the chair and the small table. I hadn't really been worried about things moving in the apartment, but if things were starting to show themselves, that made me nervous. I walked over to the chair and looked it over. There was a tag on it from an old upholstery business. I looked up the business online and only found a mention of it having closed in the 70s. Then I checked the table. It had a small drawer which was surprisingly deep. I pulled the drawer all the way forward and found a business card. I didn't remember seeing anything in the drawer before. The card read, Frank K. Fitzgerald, Attorney at Law. I opened my laptop and Googled the name. So many Frank Fitzgeralds came up. I narrowed it down to the area of the city where the estate sale had been. Still, too many names. I looked up obituaries and found 2 entries with his name, along with the address where the estate sale had been. The first was for an obituary for Daisy Fitzgerald, who had been his wife. She had passed 8 months ago. The second mention was another obituary. This one was for Frank Fitzgerald, who passed 7 months ago. From what I could tell, Daisy had been ill, and Frank had taken care of her in their home. In Daisy's obituary, there was an old black and white picture of the 2 of them. The man looked just as my friend Erica had described, and in the picture was the beautiful chair that now sat in my living room. Daisy and Frank had been married for 53 years before she died. I had a momentary shiver run down my back. But as I looked at the old black and white picture, I was overcome with a wave of emotion. These 2 people had been so close and so in love that even death didn't break their bond. I don't know if Frank is still caring for Daisy, or if this is just a resonance of all the emotions they had between them, and what I experience are loops of old energy. I still have the chair, and my things still strangely move around. I've never actually seen Frank's ghost, and my friend Erica hasn't seen him since that night. I now know that lilies are flowers of the dead, and I don't buy them anymore. I still do buy daisies when I can, and I like to imagine that Frank enjoys them too.